Welcome to part 2 of the creation and destruction of my fallen pot tank. In part 1, I went over the whole concept that I had behind the tank and how I planted it. As a brief recap, this is what the tank looked like after 1 month of having plants in the tank and just adding fish. The second month update, you can see there is a lot more plant growth now. I was pretty happy with this and was honestly surprised by how much growth I was seeing. I wasn't sure if it was because of the aquasoil substrate or if it was because I was also dosing liquid fertilizers, but either way, I was really happy with it. One thing I forgot to record was that I added a few little pieces of Java moss tied to some filter pad media, and I tucked that behind the lip of the pot. Now, within that 1 month period, this moss really started taking off and was beginning to take over the whole top part of the pot. The red emerald philodendron cutting I had in the tank was before kind of slumped over. Now, after 1 month, it was completely perked up and facing the light. At this point in time, I also realized that a few little pieces of pearlweed scattered around the tank, and one of them landed in the front corner. As you can see, it has taken off after a few weeks of being in that little spot, and now is taking over the S repens, and you can see some more of it crawling along the bottom. An unexpected, really nice surprise was that I found that my Bucephalandra Godzilla was flowering. Now, this was the first time any aquarium plant has flowered in my tank, so I was super excited about this. This is a picture of the flower not open all the way. I forgot to take pictures of the flower after it opened, of course, but it pretty much looked like an Anubias nana flower, really similar. And once it opened up, that same day, the petal, its one petal, started ripping. It kind of looked like it was absorbing too much water. And from my research, the flowers are supposed to be, of course, above the water, otherwise they're not going to get pollinated. So I think that was the issue. All of that aside, I was just really, really happy to see that, and it made me feel like I was doing something right with this tank. Around 3 months into the tank, I took out the red emerald philodendron because it was getting too big, and mostly because the roots started taking over the bottom part of the tank. I also removed all of the pearlweed that wasn't growing in the pot, mainly because I didn't want it to take over as it had already started doing with the S repens in the corner. Added some salvinia to the top portion of the tank where I used to have some Monte Carlo growing. I also want to highlight the fairy moss growing on the stump. Now, this is supposed to be considered an aquarium plant where it's similar to duckweed and it just grows on the surface of the water. In this picture, I had been growing it for a while on this stump, and underneath I think was some dried up moss. And it was doing really well for many months until eventually I think the water level got a little too low in the tank at some points and it all dried up. So that's unfortunate, but as you can see here, it's growing completely out of the water with just the roots being moist. Last thing about this plant that I want to mention is that it was really, really a bright color. This picture is actually very accurate to the color that it was in real life. It was practically a hot pink color, which I'd never seen before when other people display this plant. I think what attributed to this color was that it was under some really intense light. Although the aquarium lights I was using weren't very strong, because the plant was out of the water and very close to the night crew LED light, I think it was the reason why it was so hot pink. At the 4-month mark, I decided it was time for me to change out the filter media just because it was getting too gunked up with bacteria and fish waste. I took out this green plant that I couldn't figure out the name of. It was just growing a little too fast and was constantly coming out of the tank all the time. I trimmed the Bacopa caroliniana and the Ammonia gracilis. I also took out all of the moss I had growing on top of the pot because at this point it just felt like the pot was having a bad hair day all the time. At the end of 2021, I decided the top of the pot was a little too barren now for me after removing all of that moss, so I decided to fill up the space with some wood. I also added 2 small Bucephalandra Kedagang plants. I am always experimenting with this tank, and for me, having the red emerald philodendron going up out of the water was really helpful for creating this diagonal line from the edge of the pot leading up towards the wood out of the water to the top where the plant is. To the untrained eye, creating this diagonal line up out of the tank may seem trivial, but this is actually really important to the whole form of the scape because as your eye exits the tank through going up towards the plant, you take a step back and you get to look at the tank as a whole, which is very important, especially when there's so many small elements in the tank. You may notice that in some of my pictures, the tank is very brightly lit with more of a yellow hint to it, and in other cases it's more moody and dark. I achieved this look by having 2 light sources on my tank. The first light source is a house lamp that has a yellow tint to it. That's directly above the tank. The second light source is a Night Crew LED light, which is more cool white color, and that is in the back of the tank. By turning off the yellow house lamp, I'm creating a light source behind the tank, which is creating the front to have a more darker, moody tone. This is the tank at the 5-month mark. I'm pretty happy with the overall growth, especially with the Ammonia gracilis, because it's showing some pink and red hints in the leaves. But not everything is going as planned, because as you can see here, the S. repens is showing some nutrient deficiencies. There is yellowing of the leaf tips and yellowing of the veins, along with some small pinholes forming in the leaves. No, these holes were not done by snails. This is also a form of nutrient deficiency, and this one I know is caused by a potassium deficiency. The other ones I'm not sure of. At this point in time, the Azolla fairy moss is also beginning to dry up. This is just to show you that not everything goes well in the tank, even if the overall tank looks good. On day 200 of this tank being set up, this is the last picture I have of the tank before ripping everything apart. Now it is a little overgrown, that's because I was already in the process of already emptying tanks out and cleaning stuff and preparing to move for March 18th, which is crazy soon at this point. So I've been not doing trimmings, haven't been doing water changes as often. This is the last water change day I did for the tank. On March 11th is when I tore the whole tank down. In this clip, I already took out most of the stem plants and most of the ground cover in the front, and believe it or not, all of those rocks came from inside the pot and around the tank. I know guys, it's a lot more than I thought there was. Here's a few clips of after the pot was taken out. Now I did take more footage of like removing stuff, but unfortunately my phone ran out of storage and then at some point it stopped recording most of the stuff, so unfortunately this is all I have. But I like this look actually without the pot and kind of barren. It gives me a lot of ideas for scapes in the future actually. When taking apart the tank, there weren't that many surprises, but there were a few, I would say. One of the biggest surprises is I found my one Amano shrimp in the hob filter, all the way in the back where all the filter media is, and I have no idea how long he had been living there, probably for a good few months. I did have a bunch of shrimp come out of this tank, and I decided to give those away. I think I'm going to go towards having this tank filled with Malawa shrimp. So for the setup, I'm going to use Malawa shrimp instead of Neocaridina shrimp. Here's a clip from when we were living in a hotel room for a bit in Atlanta, Georgia. All the fish arrived, more or less, minus 2 boxes of fish. Ah, my heart, I don't want to think about that. Anyways, the fish that arrived came more or less alive. I did lose a few of the blue lace snake skins because their box was really badly beaten up, and yeah, unfortunately I did lose like a few good males, but it's alright because the majority of them did survive, and here's a clip of them now in their tank with plants, and yeah, it's not beautiful, it's just for the meantime while I set up their new tank. And here's a clip of all the coolie loaches going crazy. Now, I was hoping to find some baby coolies in the tank when I tore it apart. Unfortunately, I did not. Their eggs could have been eaten by the guppies, or they could have maybe just never bred. I didn't see any spawning behavior, but they are mostly nocturnal, so I could have always missed that. But the good news is I do have all of my coolies still, so I may be increasing their number in the future, and I will be most likely adding them back to this tank too. Here's my coolies right now. Yes, I know it's not exactly a great tank, but you know, it does the job right. It doesn't need to be a glass box to be a tank, and they're pretty happy in there. I barely ever see them, and they're always hiding under that giant ball of moss. Because the bulbitis gets really large, I decided to opt for a bigger tank this time, and thankfully Petco was having their $1 per gallon sale, which also translated to rimless aquariums now. So I was super hyped about that, and I got a few of these 14-gallon tanks. This is the tank right now. It's been set up for about a month with water and wood. You can see all the little microfauna doing their job, cleaning up all the algae and diatoms and everything that's been growing in this tank while it's just been sitting there. The tank is just about ready to get planted, so stay tuned for more updates on my fallen pot tank. Like and subscribe if you like this type of content. And don't forget to hit the little bell notification to get notified every time I come up with new videos. Thank you.